deadline for war. Only hours away, Iraqis attended government-sponsored demonstrations all over the country. They chanted for President Saddam Hussein, and they chanted against President George Bush.
Summer of 1990, I was in 8th grade, 13 years old, going on 14, and Iraq and Kuwait all of a sudden started to appear in the news, and before then I've never heard of them.
Good evening. The tiny Persian Gulf kingdom of Kuwait is in the hands of Iraqi invaders tonight. It's been an incredible 24 hours, a day and night of terror and firefights, of one military force completely overwhelming its outgunned opposition. In one short day, tens of thousands of Iraqi soldiers stormed across the border and across the desert and swept into the capital.
I can remember the newscasters making reference to this being this generation's next world war, and it was quite scary.
But today, as president, I ask for your support in a decision I've made to stand up for what's right and condemn what's wrong, all in the cause of peace. At my direction, elements of the 82nd Airborne Division, as well as key units of the United States Air Force, are arriving today to take up defensive positions in Saudi Arabia.
I can remember thinking that here I was turning 14, 4 more years and I would be eligible for the draft, and they even started talking about bringing the draft in because so many troops were going to be needed for this war. They were making comparisons of this being the next Vietnam. And there was a lot of uncertainty amongst us teenagers and even our parents.
Let me just very briefly bring you up to date on what we do know. Reporting from Saudi Arabia and Washington tonight confirms that there has been unusual American air activity in the area of the Persian Gulf.
I remember when the war started, I was helping a friend of my father's move his business from one to another, and as we were in the car, the radio interrupted and said that we were actually engaged in war. And we immediately pulled over to a friend's house and started to turn on the TV and sat and watched in just amazement at the fact that we were actually in war, and the images that were over on the TV were just unspeakably thinkable. You could almost feel the world shrinking on this night. It definitely felt like a smaller place.
Something is happening outside. Peter Arnett, join me here. Let's describe to our viewers what we're seeing. The skies over Baghdad have been illuminated. We're seeing bright flashes going off all over the sky. Peter?
Well, there's anti-aircraft gunfire going into the sky. We hear the sound of planes. They're coming over our hotel. However, we have not yet heard the sound of bombs landing, but there's tremendous lightning in the sky, lightning like a fix.
There were so many comparisons of this being our generation's Vietnam War that there was real concern about support for our troops, and of course there were protesters from America that didn't agree with the war, but it was different. They supported the troops but just didn't support the war, so there was a real change in how people were protesting. After a few days, General Schwarzkopf would come on TV and start giving us updates on the progress of the war, and it was just completely impressive how the technology that we had and what we were doing with it, it was kind of scary.
What are your impressions of Saddam Hussein as a military strategist?
First of all, if we thought it would have been such an easy fight, we definitely would not have stocked 60 days worth of supplies on these log bases. So, as I've told you all for a very, very long time, it is very, very important for a military commander never to assume away the capabilities of his enemy. And when you're facing an enemy that is over 500,000 strong, has the reputation that they've had of fighting for 8 years, being combat-hardened veterans, had the number of tanks and the type of equipment they had, you don't assume away anything. So we certainly did not expect it to go this way.
It seemed for the longest time that we had an air assault on Iraq, and once the ground invasion started, we kind of rolled right straight through the Iraqi soldiers, and all of a sudden lots of video footage started to come in where most of the soldiers were just surrendering. That was kind of amazing. Then you would start to see footage of oil fields being set on fire and how the black clouds would just almost make day turn into night. In just 7 short months, the war was over. I mean, 7 months. We heard about close to 500,000 some odd soldiers and the military might that Iraq had. It was, like I said before, everybody thought this was going to be Vietnam, but in 7 months, I mean, the war's over. And then the cleanup started, and that was when the devastation was seen on TV with all the tanks scattered all over the roads and the oil fields on fire, and that's when it kind of sunk in, when that we had actually been through a war. And what was even more amazing is that we as Americans, and even the coalition, the UN, there was not a significant loss of life on our side. At that point in time, I think for the most part everybody was in support of defending Kuwait. There were some questions about, was this for oil? But, Kuwait was occupied. And, I think we did the right thing.